Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the North Bend City Council work session agenda for Monday, August 9th, 2020 at 4:30 p.m. in the council chambers. Good evening and welcome, everyone. Tonight we have a couple presentations. Number 2 on the agenda is Presentation A, Coos Bay North Bend Visitor and Convention Bureau Semi-Annual Report. I believe we have the director here with us. Janice, how are you today?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm very well. Thank you, City Council. And I'm assuming I don't have a mouse, so I just hit the arrow. Okay. So twice a year or so, I am allowed to come and give you guys an update on what's happening with the VCB and the Visitor and Convention Bureau and what we're up to. So I'll start. Am I okay to go? I don't know if you guys can see this or not.
I can see on my screen. I've got, there we go.
All right. So we're going to start with the budget. We have completed the last fiscal year. Unfortunately, the funding is not complete until the city of Coos Bay goes through the audit process. So I don't have complete income figures for the last 3 months of our last fiscal year, so April, May, June. So for this purposes, I stopped at the third quarter. This will give you a good idea of where we stood at the end of the third quarter, which was 116% to budgeted income and only 70% to budgeted expenses. We are anticipating about 150,000 or so more in income with only about 100,000 more in expenses. So we will be under our expenses, but over quite significantly our budgeted income for, especially our TLT. We were over, as you know, in our carryover for last year, but we are also going to be significantly over in the budgeted amount for the the lodging tax that comes from our 3 funders, the City of North Bend, the City of Coos Bay, and the Coquel Indian Tribe. So we will end our fiscal year in a very positive position. Our budget for the new fiscal year, while we were still a bit conservative in our carryover, I believe that we under budgeted that, so we may end up with quite a bit more in our carryover than we have budgeted here. We believe we are spot on this year with our lodging tax revenues, and of course what other incomes that come in. The Coos Bay Visitor Information Center is budgeted through the City of Coos Bay. It does not come out of any of the funds that come from the City of North Bend or the Coquel Indian Tribe. We are in talks right now with the city administrator and the city recorder to manage the North Bend Visitor Information Center. The proposed contract has been provided to the city, and now it's that fine tuning of what happens. So as you know, right now your visitor center is not, and if you guys don't mind, I gotta take this off because I can't breathe and talk at the same time. Your visitor center has not been open. We are moving forward with the belief that we will be successful in our negotiations. We have talked to Cardinal Services, who do our HR, and have already posted a position, even though we can't fill it until we have the contract signed. But we wanted to be a little ahead of the game so that we can be ready to go when we're ready. So that will add a third department to our funding, our budget. Right now we have the VCB, the Coos Bay VIC, and then we would have a third department for the North Bend VIC. And again, the funds that we would get from North Bend for that endeavor would not go to anything but that endeavor. In other words, money from Coos Bay or the Coquel Tribe would not go to that at this time. This shows you how we ended the year and how we are projecting the new year for our advertising marketing plan. As you know, that's our biggest outlay, is to market the destination to potential travelers. Our ad budget includes our website. Our local ad budget is things that we promote not locally, but to bring people here for local events, such as the Bay Area Fun Festival, the Mill Luck Celebration, Holiday Lights. We also go to trade shows and we bring in visiting media. That's the trade show FAM line item there. Last year at this time, when we were budgeting for the past fiscal year, the red bar, which is the second to the far right columns, but the second one in from the far right, the dark red one, at this time last year was at about $397,000. That's what we were budgeting, which was significantly lower than we had been spending in the previous couple of years. Because we had the extra carryover, we did a supplemental budget that brought our marketing budget back up closer to what we had been spending recently. And then this year, we are looking at spending between $550,000 and probably $600,000 on marketing alone. So that'll get us closer to being in line with some of our competition on the Central and North Coast, which is what we are trying to work toward. We will probably never reach them in budget because they all have multi-million-dollar budgets just for their marketing, and we have $1 million budget for everything we do. So tourism in Coos County in 2020, I was hoping that this number wasn't going to be as dire as it is. We lost 38.7% of visitor spend in the year 2020. We went from $277.3 million spent in 2019 to $170.1 million spent in 2020. However, on the bright side of that, accommodations only lost 5%, and we only lost 2% in our lodging tax collections. The big losers, unfortunately, were our food service, our arts and recreation, and our retail, who, as you can see from this chart, lost significant amounts of income from visitor spending in the last year, or in that year. Visitor spending usually supports about 3,300 jobs. We lost 350 of those in the last year, but I'm sure that if we looked at it more closely, it's probably more than that based on the restaurants going to takeout only for a long time, hotels not having full staff, that kind of thing. But the data shows that we only lost 350 jobs. In the past, our overnight visitor spend dollar amount per day was about $112 a day. That was significantly lower than other parts of the coast and the state as a whole. We also went down there, and right now our visitor spend per day is about $95. A lot of that is because they couldn't sit in a restaurant. They had to take it out, which means that they didn't tip as high, they probably didn't buy as much, they didn't drink as much either. So
Janice,
yes,
remind me
ma'am.
how you collect the data on that.
So data for this kind of data comes from Travel Oregon through a third-party research firm called Dean Runyon and Associates. They are the leading travel research firm in the country. They do this research for almost every state in the nation. They look at a lot of different information to come up with these numbers as far as how money is spent in each destination. And I wish I could explain it all to you, but it's very technical. But we used them when I was back in Texas as well, so they are very well known. All right, so give you a little glimpse into our advertising campaigns that we've been doing lately. At the middle of the spring, we got a bit of an infusion from the board with a supplemental budget, which allowed us to do more print, more SEO, SEM advertising, more digital, more streaming. So some of these are what you'll see. The more print went into things like 1859 magazine, and Northwest Travel and Life magazine, but we also did a lot of digital. The Space to Spread Out was our campaign for this whole past year to give people an idea that not only are we somewhat off the beaten path, still somewhat undiscovered, but there's a lot of space for people to recreate here and be apart from others. We also, for the first time, did Spanish language advertising, which we had not done before. And unfortunately, you can't just like translate an ad and expect it to go out and have it be correct. Our tagline, Space to Spread Out, didn't exactly translate. So what this translates to roughly is space to relax, or a place to relax, or a place to to find yourself. We also can't just put out ads and not have some place for Spanish language people to go on our website in their own language. So we had to create a landing page that these digital ads lead to. One of these is a print ad, and that's in El Latina de Hoy, which is a publication out of Portland that has quite a good circulation. We looked at a bunch of different websites and publications, and that was one of the top that we found. In June, the Olympic trials were in Eugene, so we took our 15-second advertisings, our TV ads, and we retagged them at the end that said home of running legend Steve Prefontaine. We ran those in Eugene and on the NBC stations in Portland, Bend, and Medford as well. That helped to solidify and help bring people who are real Steve Prefontaine fans to town. I know that Linda Prefontaine, who does a tour of the area, especially where Steve trained and lived and where his burial site is, had significantly more tours since the trials. So that's good to hear. We've also been doing a lot more in the way of e-blasts, newsletters, and sponsored content. We find real success with these. These are all us. So we have complete control over the content that goes out, but it's going out to other people's lists. So this 1859 one on the left-hand side here went to 1859 magazine's subscriber list of, I think it's somewhere around 25,000, and it was all us. It was talking about fishing here, it was talking about our food and bringing your dog, and of course going to Whiskey Run. The one on the right-hand side was in the Medford Tribune. That also went to their reader list. We've done one with several with Northwest Travel and Life and Outdoor Northwest publications. We can track these. We know how many times it was opened. We can see how many clicks came through to our website. So we can really track these types of things. Sponsored content, we bought, instead of placing an ad in the Willamette Week, we bought a space to put our own story in because that helps people to envision themselves here as opposed to just seeing an ad. And we have a lot of really good response from that. We also brought in a writer in the spring. He came in April with his family to experience fishing on our coast, and he did a whole story for This Is the Travel Oregon website, and our story appears on that. One of the things that is difficult for us to monetize or to show conversion is in the travel industry. We can't say for sure that somebody saw this ad and then they showed up in our destination. Mm-hmm. So we don't own the product. I'm not selling a widget. So I can't really look at my ads and say, oh, that ad made this sale. So we try and find other ways, things like click-throughs and how many times somebody read the story. We also look at our social media for successes. Facebook is still our #1 social media site. We've had almost 3 million impressions in fiscal year 21 with almost 570,000 engagements. That's people liking, commenting, sharing, watching videos. And of that, 370,000 of those were video views. Our videos really get a lot of attention, so we've been adding more of that. And in fact, we now have a TikTok channel. So y'all come find us on TikTok and like our videos. We only have 4. I'm working on it.
We'll do one with you. We'll get the whole council to
that'd
do
be
a
awesome.
dance TikTok, right, guys?
I look forward to TikTok.
One of the other ways that we help to spread the word is to bring media into the area so that they can experience our destination. Back in November, we brought Peggy Cleveland. One of her articles has already appeared in 6 different publications that she writes for. Tim Neville came in January, and I was supposed to change that. That was 2021. His article, he came for a weekend, and his article on that weekend was in AAA's Via magazine, which was really awesome. Tracy Beard came in May, and she has 3 major stories that are to come out of that trip. One has already published in Wander with Wonder, which is a website for travelers. The next one will be in the next issue of Northwest Travel and Life, and that's about our food and the evolution of the food in the area. And then we've got a story coming out in Upscale Living. She did that one on Restaurant O and the Bay Point Landing as the features there, though she'll talk about other areas in the destination. And then just last week, we welcomed these two young men. They're influencers, cyclists and running influencers, Micah Meyer and Wade Holland. They are writing blogs for Schwinn, REI, and their own social media, and we've already seen several of their posts come through. So they had a really good time. They rode Whiskey Run. They rode Fat Tire biking in the dunes, so that was really fun. And then last week also, well, I guess it was the week before, we had the Oregon Mayor's Conference. So while Visitor and Convention Bureau is our name and Visitor comes first, we also service conventions and conferences when we can. 80 mayors from around the state came to Coos Bay and North Bend for their annual conference. It was probably the first conference that most of us had even considered having in person. It went very well. Both Mayor Engelke and Mayor Benetti gave welcoming remarks. They went out on the dunes. They did tours around both cities, North Bend and Coos Bay, about some of the economic development projects that have been going on, the urban renewal projects. We did a huge silent auction the first night of the event that brought in twice as much as they had ever brought in for a silent auction. So we were very pleased about that. And then we had a food truck event out at the North Bend Boardwalk that I think was very well attended, but also extremely appreciated by everybody. I heard multiple times, best conference ever. It was actually organized by the League of Oregon Cities for the Oregon Mayor's Conference, and I think we'll see other organizations that the League works with here in the future because they were really impressed by what we've done. So I already discussed a little bit about the North Bend Visitor Center. It has been closed for a while, and we are in talks. And then what's coming up in fiscal year 22, which is where we are now, and it's big data. One of the things that I was telling you about that where we can't track our ads to see if people actually convert and come to the destination. One of the organizations we're starting to work with is called C Source, and that's SEE Source. They track cell phone data and Visa or credit card data, but the big one is cell phone data. And in the near future, we will be able to serve up an ad on a cell phone, on an app, and then they'll be able to tell us if that cell phone shows up in our destination. So that'll be the first time we'll be able to actually see conversion of an ad bringing somebody to the destination. In the meantime, we will be able to see how many cell phones from other places show up at places like Whiskey Run and the dunes and hotels and restaurants. So it's going to give us some really good data where these folks are coming from. Of course, the cell phone doesn't show up without the person with them. So it'll help us to see that we are actually marketing in the right directions and some new markets that may come out of it. AirDNA will give us some data on whether vacation rentals, this will give us a look at how many vacation rentals are in our area, how booked they are, how much tax they should be collecting and then remitting. Of course, a lot of our vacation rentals, as we know, are outside both city limits, but we'll be able to look at the ones that are within the city limits and see if there is some that are maybe working illegally or not, don't have their business. Aren't aware, yes, thank you. That they should be complying with city regulations, permitting, and remitting their lodging tax. So that'll give both of our cities a chance to look at vacation rentals that are showing up and making sure that they have them on their list. So we're working on that. We're going to, again, do more print and digital and streaming, a lot more just advertising in general. We have 2 more conferences coming up this year, both of them in October. The Oregon Coast Visitors Association does a 2.5-day summit that will be here at the beginning or second week of October. And then the Oregon Economic Development Association will also be here towards the latter part of October. And then more visitor services if we can come to terms with the city. And that's my presentation. I'm open to any questions. I will tell
Yeah.
you that we just got our new visitor guide in, hot off the presses. We're going to still complete fulfillment with the one we have currently because the data inside didn't change very much. But the North Bend's dunes, that's what I consider your top attraction,
Yep.
is on the cover.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, I want to say especially thank you on behalf of North Bend and Coos Bay. You guys did such a great job of the conference. I too heard many people saying best conference ever. People were so excited for the tours and understanding how our urban renewal areas work and the things that we're doing with them. So thank you for helping put on an amazing conference. I'll be looking forward to the other ones that come here as well. I've been also reminded, by the way, especially with the bringing back the masks, to make sure we're speaking into the mics too. So, there's one right on the table up there, and I know it's a little bit difficult, so we want to make sure we're speaking in. Councilor Gall, did I see a hand raised? You have some question for Janice?
Yeah, I'd like to make a quick comment. Our company relies a lot on traveling labor force, and it seems like their benefit packages anymore does not cover the room rent. It just seems like motel rates have just skyrocketed.
Yes.
You've probably noticed that in some of your,
So that's a product of a workforce issue. We don't have enough staff working in our hotels right now for the hotels to have every room available. So when a hotel, like, we'll just use a couple of examples. So the Red Lion and the Edgewater are not open completely. In other words, they don't have every room available right now because they can't clean those rooms. So if they can't clean the room, they can't rent it. So they have blocked off certain parts of their hotel that are not available. When that happens, but it looks like the Red Lion is sold out on paper. If you call them, they don't have a room available. But Motel 6 has rooms available. Motel 6 can increase the rate of their rooms because they're the only ones in town with rooms available. So it's a supply and demand issue, and it's also, while workforce or workers coming in to stay in hotels to do things like construction and work at the hotel, at the hospital, would not be considered a luxury. Travel is considered still a luxury item in this society. So hotels can basically charge what the market will bear. And if there's only 5 rooms
and it's
left.
gone way up.
It has
I mean,
gone
it's
way up.
Borderline gouging, I would say,
And
but.
that's
yeah.
and that is across the board. And it's a product of not having enough housekeeping staff to clean the rooms
Oh,
to
I
keep the
get it, and you
hotels
don't
open.
see the $49.95 rate at Motel 6 anymore, you know.
Well,
so
and that'll come back
yeah.
towards the end of the summer when we don't have as many visitors in the area.
It is a huge deal to us.
It is a
because-
huge deal.
Because, you know, the subsistence program that a lot of this workforce has used to be pretty lucrative, but now it doesn't even cover the room, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I
And
just wanted to throw
that
that-
is a discussion we're having with other entities in the area about how to fix the issue. Unfortunately, until the federal government stops paying the extra amounts, folks have decided not to go back to work.
Yeah, no, I
And
get it.
and
I get
some
that.
of that is not
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
childcare as well.
Yeah.
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 And, all right, any other questions for Janice? Well, thanks for the update. We always look forward to them, and I know I've been seeing a lot of people from out of town enjoying the beaches and the sand dunes, so it's always fun to find out where they're coming from, and we know how much money that the tourism brings into our communities, so we
Yes.
appreciate all the hard
We're
work.
looking forward to not having to take quite as long to recover from this past year's decline as may have been pessimistically believed, but, you know, until this virus is contained and completely removed from
Yeah.
our society, it's going to be a guessing game
Yeah.
until then. But thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate the opportunity to keep you informed.
All right. Okay, so we have a presentation B on the agenda, and that's the North Bend School District. We have our Attendant tonight, Kevin Bogatane. How are you tonight?
Good, thank you.
Good.
I appreciate you allowing me to be here and chat with you a little bit tonight. Connected to tourism, I am here to talk about an upcoming school bond to get people to stay here. And
Yeah.
so not just visit here, but to actually live here and stay here. So I wanted to share work that we've started over the last few years. So I'm just moving this forward now. Perfect. So we have been working on a bond plan for about 3 years. So I know sometimes it's about timing as we're in the midst of all of this pandemic, but this has been a long time coming to get it to this point. And so it's been 20 years since the North Bend School District had a school bond. There were some projects, we did about a $12 million bond back in 1992 or 1991. So it's been a long time, and a lot has changed in 20 years. Technology, the idea around safety and security and what we expect from schools, and then just of our basic systems are all getting old. So that's kind of some major pieces. Like I said, we've been doing this for a while. We did a 10-year facilities assessment that looked at all of the needs across the district. That, again, costs just seem to be escalated if you've done any projects. It seems like everything's, even as we did this about a year ago, to do all the projects outlaid in this facility plan was about $120 million. I'm guessing that probably is more expensive today. We obviously are not coming with a $120 million school bond, so just don't get too afraid here. So we did a long-range facility plan that outlined all of that information. And then the next step of that was to put all that work in a bond development committee. And over the last 12 months, that group had got together, looked through all those projects, assessed our buildings, assessed all of what our needs are, talked to our community, and ultimately came up with a package that is $48.3 million that addresses needs at all 4 buildings and all 4 schools, addressing all students K through 12. The big issues that this bond will address is health, safety, and security, modernizing just our aging facilities, and then really hands-on learning, our career technical education, vocational education, really enhancing those programs. So just a couple examples of when we talk about health and safety, of what really that means. It's putting in just even safety access into our buildings. Right now, you really can just walk through the front door of our buildings and kind of down the hallway and in you go. And really, I think all of us would kind of start to see is like we want a barrier between someone entering and someone getting to your kid's classroom. And so that's part of this would be to put in they call it like a safety vestibule, some area that is a gap between someone coming in off the street and getting into our schools, classrooms, those kinds of spaces, at least quickly. The other part is just making sure that you can kind of lock down things in a quick manner if needed, being able to communicate effectively. Again, we have really aging systems, and so you can't necessarily hear the message in all spaces very easily. So this adds, again, all these projects, when you start to go through thousands of square feet, a communication system is multi-million-dollar project across the district. So all these are really expensive. The other part, as we've seen come with this pandemic, is inadequate sort of just health nurse spaces. We need spaces to quarantine kids now. We probably have always needed this. We just have not really prioritized it. So in this, we would kind of remodel our front entries to make sure that we have spaces for sick kids to go, isolate them as needed, as they're waiting for their parents to come so that they don't reinfect the other ones. The other things is just redoing some things. Right now, sick kids get marched through the office. So to have a space where they can come in separately and be quarantined and not have to infect a bunch of people would be great. And the other thing is just improved air quality. We are purchasing out of like our recovery money air purifiers, but that really doesn't really address just the age systems. If you go out to North Bay, the HVAC systems are the original HVAC systems from 1970. So they have some needs to do. So we have improved air quality and improving those systems across included in this bond. Again, I talked about, the average age is 59 years old. Hillcrest is over 70 years old. They have done a really good job of taking care of our buildings, and that came through in our building assessment. But there are big projects that we just don't do because they're super expensive. We've saved money. We can't save the money to even just roof the entire middle school. This summer, we're doing part of it that is leaking in the gym, but there's another, thousands of square feet of the middle school that needs to be replaced. And so again, it's a multi-million-dollar project and that we have a hard time saving up for. So those addresses those kinds of things. This addresses all energy efficiencies. So putting in LED lighting, getting rid of all the asbestos. We have, again, go back into the 50s and 60s, there's asbestos tile sort of throughout entire buildings. We've gotten rid of some of it, but in the big areas where you kind of the entire hallways and some of our other classrooms, it just takes time. And again, those are really expensive now when we talk about asbestos abatement. So, and the other part is just updating spaces. Again, the technology needs nowadays, our electrical grid isn't quite up to speed to cover just the electrical and technology needs that are growing with our kids and staff. This district has done a great job of promoting and building and supporting career technical education. So these are, we have a brand new building that is for our construction trades program. If you haven't had a chance, that really just started coming into full operation right as the pandemic hit. And so we've been it's been moving along, but it's a little behind schedule because of that. But we also have a really successful culinary program. Hundreds of kids in that program, but a space under the pandemic that can hold about 10. In a normal time, maybe 20. And even then, really packed. And so again, this bond would expand those spaces, specifically career technical education. Our old metal shop, once we moved out all the wood shop stuff, we have some extra space, but a bunch of aging equipment. And again, moving things, super expensive as you think about moving electrical, moving to move the air out, just circulation, ventilation. So again, that's a huge part of this bond is to upgrade, enhance all those vocational. The other part is adding into our healthcare. We have a growing health pathway for kids, and so this part adds more to that. I'd say the last part of this, and maybe it's in this next one, in the science labs, this last year, we were starting to do some science programs again, bringing smaller groups back. They lit up one of the gas lines into our classroom and the little Bunsen burner, and they're lighting this, and they're just kind of getting to see if it works. They turn off the gas, or so they thought, and then the Bunsen burner's still lit. And so that was kind of a problem. And so all of a sudden now it's like there's a little bit of a panic. The gas gets shut off to all of those classrooms across the district as we do this huge inspection and try to figure out what's causing. And again, what came back was, yeah, these are just old. I mean, and you need to replace these lines. You need to replace, again, all that stuff when you start to go across the system in middle school and high school, pretty expensive. So this bond would address those kinds of even just basic science needs so our kids can do the kinds of science and science projects that we would expect of all of our high school programs. So we do have a list of all of our programs. I have a sheet, just a front back, that kind of highlights what I just talked about in these three kind of centered areas and what we're doing at each of the school. I apologize for the tiny print. I also have a card that has our bond, and you can do a little QR code and just point your phone at that. It'll take us to our website where you can see more of this, and we'll be adding more, some drawings and some pictures of projected what these spaces might look like in the future as we start to talk about all these different projects at each school. I'll just highlight a few of them at Hillcrest. Hillcrest is a two-story building. If you are in a wheelchair, you can access one level or the other, but you're not going in between two without going outside and possibly through the rain. So this would add an elevator, under an old ADA. So a really much needed program. We do have a life skills program, but if you're in a wheelchair, unfortunately, we don't allow you to go to Hillcrest because you can't get access to our playground. So those are things that just need to be done. And again, elevators are super expensive. Another thing at Hillcrest, we have some increasing PE needs. So this would add either a new gym, or we just leave the gym and add a new cafeteria, so that you would have a gym space and a cafeteria space so that you can actually teach PE throughout the day. And it would also be compliant, like seismic compliant, so that it would be a shelter for that part of the community in case of an earthquake or other kind of tragedy kind of thing, that we could have a place that will be standing. And so it would be kind of built to that standard. It might be either the gym part of it or it would be a cafeteria. So those are kind of exciting things under kind of at Hillcrest. At North Bay, one of the things, again, all of these schools have the safety upgrades, windows, again, a lot of single pane windows, LED lighting, intruder, those kinds of things. You know, these schools are really nice. This is an old middle school, so it has a lot of space, but needs some things, and it doesn't have like a covered play area, which isn't really included in this bond, but as part of the work that we can then maybe use some of our general fund bond to help do some of those projects that we've been doing all along. Again, updated communication, just kind of a lot of needed projects at North Bay. The middle school, again, it's just, if you walk through there, it's just a lot of, it's just dated. So again, this is almost throughout this entire building, electrical, flooring, plumbing. It's almost like you name it, new roof. The way you look at this list, you'd think the thing is falling down. It's not quite to that level, but you know, if we don't pass bonds like this, I'm not sure the school, like in another 20 years, I'm not sure what we do if you can't pass a bond for a period of time. So a lot of a lot of needs at these schools. And then I have talked a lot about the high school, these CTE programs. One that I didn't really talk about was renovating the multipurpose room. And we call multipurpose room, you might have think of it as, well, if you've been to the high school, you might have thinking of it as the auditorium, because where the stage is. You might think of it as a cafeteria, because that's where our kids eat. So it kind of has lots of purposes. We actually did a drawing, and our architects worked on a plan to build a sort of temporary, or not temporary, a more movable pull-out bleacher structure that would house about 320 people, and then kind of demolish the stage. So you actually have a place where our award-winning band can play, and you can get 300 people in there to watch and watch them perform in a space that would be suitable, as well as our drama program. A huge need in the community for our parents and families of drama to build a like performing arts center was sort of not really in the bond picture, and just really cost-wise. So this was a compromise that our committee went through that, again, I think was well needed, and I think when they see it all done, I think they'll be super excited about this space. And then we kind of talked about all those other updates are included at the high school. And again, there's other things like parking and driveway. And again, if you've been to our schools, you can say, yeah, we have needs at almost all of them to sort of help make them safer places for drop off. Our middle school needs some work to figure out and reconfigure kind of how kids and families come into that space and out. So that's kind of the overview. Probably what a lot of people are wanting to hear. How much is this going to cost? $48.3 million bond would increase the current tax rate by 77 cents. Our current bond that we have that's expiring at the end of next year is about 88 cents per thousand, and so this is an additional 77 cents on top of that. So per $1,000 of assessed value. In addition, we were just awarded a $4 million awesome grant. It's called Oregon School Capital Improvement Matching Funds, and so we got approved for a $4 million matching fund. We have not budgeted that, so part of it is just sort of sitting, assuming we pass the bond. $4 million would help us accomplish all those projects as we start to see everything cost a whole lot more than we thought. Partly the awesome money would be used to kind of offset those costs, those increasing costs. We did include a lot of it. I'm not sure if at the current rate, we're kind of hoping by the time you pass a bond, sell the bond, do some planning, we're talking probably 1.5 to 2 years from now that all these construction costs and some things will actually get better. So I would keep my fingers crossed on that plan. So that's in a nutshell, a lot of information about our bond and what's going on, but I'd take any questions and appreciate your opportunity
When
to
do
share.
you
Yeah.
anticipate putting it on the ballot?
It's for the November 2nd here, this coming up in
Okay,
November.
all right.
So Kevin, you said, so it was 77 cents per thousand.
Yep.
The other bond is coming to the end.
Yeah, so this continues our older bond. So it adds 77 cents to the current bond.
So for the local homeowner, is it the current level plus the 77 cents?
Correct.
I'm trying to figure out what they're going to feel the difference of.
Yes. Yeah, the
70
feeling the difference is a 77 cent increase.
Okay, 77 cents.
Yeah.
Increase. I went to 3 of those schools that you had up on there. The elementary one, I can tell you, looks exactly the same that it did in 1978. I think it is really important for people who are listening to understand that if you don't take care of the things that you have, you get to the point where you might not be able to fix them at all.
Yeah, they become a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
And things happen. We're replacing the middle school gym floor, not because of our middle school, the floor leaking. We had some old pipes underneath, some strap broke the pipe. It somehow, whatever, spread water everywhere underneath the gym floor, ruined the gym floor. That'll be replaced. Our poor
Yeah.
gym, our kids won't be in the gym until about mid-October.
Oh, no.
So those are things that happen. And again, it's just those old plumbing and old things that are happening, and that just sort of is throughout our entire system.
Gets to a tipping point where it's more exponential, the damage. Counselor
Yes.
Nordoff has a question?
Yes, do all the schools have their own, like, general HVAC heating system that goes to all the classrooms? My dad and mother worked on a bond, and it took twice to get this bond to pass, where the classrooms had individual heat units in the ceiling, and they were just nightmares to maintain.
Yeah, so our elementary schools have sort of individual units in each space. Our high school has a big old boiler like we're used to, but that doesn't do the entire system. So we kind of have the high school, because they had some older systems come online, it has a little bit of a mixture, and the middle school still has an old boiler that works and is part of that. So we have a little bit of mixture in this just because of age,
Yeah,
but a lot of needs are just all aging systems.
yeah.
Counselor Slater?
Yeah, I just had a quick question.
Mike.
Are all the schools that need to have it adequately broadband wired and whatever? So you're able to, with proper equipment, you're able to march ahead and all the internet things that are around?
Yeah, I think we're okay at this point. I think there's some need for, again, the amount of video. You kind of talk about us pushing video. You saw your visitor center. That's the things that people want to see. That's the things that also suck a
Right.
lot of bandwidth. And so again, I think what the larger, I'm not a tech person, but a large, kind of that larger tube to be able to do some of that long term, we're okay short term. And certainly our schools are okay. It's really our kids in some of our more rural areas that I'm more concerned about. How do we get more of a robust broadband out to Lakeside, into some of our more further outreaching areas, especially as we're asking kids to do some online kinds of things nowadays.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
Yes.
Do we have any other further questions? So we will see this on the ballot in
You will see it,
November.
yes, the board passed it in August. We just, there's a 2-week waiting period, I think, you might see it in the paper about getting some feedback on our bond language. And yeah, it is moving forward.
If there were citizens listening tonight that wanted to learn how to join the bond committee, how would they reach out to you, or?
Yep, they can go reach out to me, or if they want to go on to our website, it's northbendschoolbond.org. And there's a place for comments. They could even put a comment in there that, hey, I would like to be in an oversight committee or be part of our bond planning process, and someone would reach out to them.
Okay, great.
Absolutely.
Thank
I'll leave
you.
these, I'll leave these for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Kaylee, I see you were doing some technical things here. Do we need,
We're good.
we're good to continue on?
Yes.
Okay, all right, great. Well, that takes us to number 3 on the agenda. We have several discussions tonight. We have A, which is the camping ordinance. I know our city planner has some information prepared for us this evening that we're going to go over. And we've got some maps to look at. And just a reminder, this is just a discussion tonight. And we're going to be getting some information and some input. And let's hear what our Mr. Denham has to say.
Our city planner on this one was smart enough to take vacation, so,
Okay, yeah.
because this is a hot subject, obviously.
Yeah.
Ralph, can I actually start with just asking you a question? 'Cause I know this is.
Certainly.
Okay, this is such a hot topic, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot in the last couple weeks. As it stands right now, before we even have this discussion, the way that the state legislature has come forward, right now, if we don't do anything, is camping legal anywhere on public lands?
Not just public lands, but public right-of-way, which is under the state definition. There are limits to that. Campgrounds, it's legal, but you have to pay.
Okay,
It's not free camping. Parks were excluded. And public parking lots were excluded under state law.
Okay.
Other than that, on any other public lands in the state of Oregon that are not restricted to public use, let's just, Coos Bay's ordinance mentioned the water board. In our case, let's say the operating area on the North Bend Airport. That is excluded from public use. So if it's open to the public today, in essence, you can walk through anywhere. It's not restricted, not fenced, not prohibited access. At this point, if it's public lands or public right-of-way, which mostly is not restricted, it's open to camp today. And the focus of this ordinance is trying to limit the area so that we can maintain it and or police it and other issues. So realistically, under state law, if we do nothing, any public street, any publicly owned property in the city of North Bend is open to camping. Just plain open, other than those physically already restricted. And parks, basically.
So, right now, it's not the 8 to 6, but if we adopt this program, then it turns into the 8 to 6, right?
Correct.
In specific properties.
And
Right.
on specific
So
properties.
if it's yellow, then, but if my street ain't yellow, then they can't park in front of my house?
Well, we're trying to model, right now, they can do it in residential
Yeah, I get it,
districts,
yeah.
in commercial districts, every zone district in the city of North Bend.
And anytime.
There has been, and this follows case law, Martin versus City of Boise.
Yeah.
Ninth District Court said we have to, and then basically have to provide some place for the homeless. The state of Oregon passed 2 House bills that primarily one of them says we have to have all this open to camping. The other one has to do a little more, or mostly more with how long we have to hold their property. If we find their property, we have to preserve it and hold their property. So those, Oregon followed the federal rule, basically Martin versus City of Boise, and adopted this. So I'd like to pick on the state and say it's all their fault, but realistically, the western states were bound by federal court decision to do something. They've left this open to us to a certain extent. And Coos Bay's ordinance was basically took McMinnville's almost verbatim, which I don't think McMinnville's been challenged yet.
They have.
They have been challenged?
Yes, sir.
And they passed the challenge, is my presumption. Took McMinnville's ordinance, modified it slightly. We looked at McMinnville's and Coos Bay's, which Coos Bay stipulates approximately 1% of their total land area. We're not saying public land, but 1% of it publicly owned, 1% of their total land area made it available for camping. The vast majority of that is public streets. Both ordinances completely restricted any residential use. We're talking multifamily down to single family. Areas that allowed camping, as in both ordinances, are excluded where residential use is. So that's how we crafted ours to begin with. Took the residential out. We also modeled Coos Bay's ordinance to a certain extent in that they exclude everything east of Highway 101 along the waterfront. And they actually exclude everything west of Empire Boulevard, which is along the waterfront in Empire area. Other than that, any commercially or industrial zone property pretty much was included in their ordinance as allowed to camp on. That is the premise for, and Bill Richardson, after reviewing Coos Bay's, requested that we give you an exhibit so you can visually see how that was affected. That is how the draft map was developed. Now, our city attorney met with, I don't know if you had 2 revisions, we had 2 revisions. Originally, we did include the downtown core. And the map you have now, I think, excludes City Hall and the fire department and the library, which we excluded the downtown core in addition. There hasn't been, that we could find yet, any definitive answer related to we have to have X amount of acres per X amount of homeless at this point.
I can give you a little bit more on that, just to the extent that it exists. The only language the legislature gives is reasonableness. But where that comes from is the case law, where they talk about basically you can't criminalize someone for having nowhere to lay down. And so, and the way that the courts talked about that in the cases was, do they have anywhere else that they can go? So there, what is probably going to be looked at when these start to get challenged in the courts is going to be like, okay, if you know that you have X number of homeless, and you know that you have 0 homeless shelters, then you should probably have some land available for them to camp. If you have a homeless shelter that has, X number of beds, then maybe you don't need quite as much land available. That's the calculus in the case law. So that's probably going to be where the reasonableness stuff kicks in. The other questions that Chelsea and I talked about were like things like the library have waters at night. How do you deal with that? Can we just put up signs? Do we have to change that? That hasn't really, obviously there's things that specific have not, haven't been brought up yet, but the safety limitations that at the airport, obviously you're not going to have people in there. As Ralph said, if it's open now, it's probably going to be open to them. But if we cut down on the little yellow bits that you have on that map, then you're going to want to be looking at, okay, well, is there some other option we can provide instead?
So is there anything else that we can do? Like, if I hear you correctly, right now, you said if we do nothing, people can camp on those public areas that you described. What if we do nothing?
If we do nothing, then basically every public place in the city is open to camping, other than those specifically restricted.
Okay.
So we would have in the neighborhood of 300 acres of the city of North Bend that it is legal to camp. And when I say residential's excluded currently, that is without permission, because under Coos Bay's ordinance, McMinn Mills ordinance, and our ordinance, if you want to we allow 1 per residence, either front yard or backyard, tents in the backyard, RVs in the front yard. And commercial entities, what I'll say are institutions, AKA a church, can allow up to 3 campers on any individual property that are an institutional organization. A church, a school can allow up to 3 on any property, a maximum inside a residential zone. So I'm not saying there's absolutely 0, but that's only by owner permission.
Okay.
That's not free gratis. That's
But right now, somebody could park in front of my house, right?
right now, under state law, somebody could park
Yeah.
their RV in front of your house, and as a matter of fact, they could pitch a tent in your front yard that's in the right of way.
For how long?
For up to, well, the RV is 72 hours, because that's parking, and that's state law. The tent can be in your front yard. I'm not gonna say, I'm just gonna say it's
Well,
not restricted as
I
a,
currently have a small motor home across the street from me, and right to the house next to it, there's a tent park, and I haven't had a problem with it. And I can see why we need to do this. I mean, you're making it pretty clear that it's wide open if we don't do nothing. Now, the only question I have is, you know, at some point, do we all get to discuss a little bit on the yellow marks and not? So.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
But, and this was a draft.
Yeah.
This was.
Yeah, I get it. It
you
says right
asked
there,
for a
draft.
visual. We
Yeah.
gave you a visual based upon the ordinance at its current status as written. And again, Pat, that doesn't mean somebody can't camp. The tent would have to be in somebody's backyard with their permission, and the RV would have to be in their driveway. It can't be on the street.
You know, and
In a
I get it
residential.
all, and I was glad to see David or somebody from the city put it on FaceTube that this whole thing that we've been reading, and I understand it all, trust me. I just, I think you're on the right track, or I think we're on the right track.
So
We
it
have
did,
to- Yeah,
and all, something to think about, this, right now, this is not going to, we're not gonna bring in ordinance to adopt tomorrow night.
Right.
This is a work session, this is a discussion, and there are areas we show which do not, reasonably allow, and we've had comments, I think Mr. Marino put a letter in, I have Scott Partney Construction, because that's an industrial area, the trucks use that, the whole street to turn into their driveways, they mentioned that underneath Chappelle, which we show on there, which may mean we'd have to gap some of it, no parking in a portion of there. So this hasn't been totally vetted, it was brought to you as a draft, but you do have to remember that I don't think, there may be one or two in the room, nobody wants them in their backyard or in front of their business. Nobody,
nobody.
Nobody
nobody.
wants
Yeah.
what?
Nobody wants this in front of their business.
Yeah.
There are a few that are going to allow it, don't get me wrong, but in 99% of our population, or 95, is going to say, I don't want them in my backyard. The problem is, and there's two things we have to think about, is once we adopt this ordinance, and Rob could probably speak to this, we have to be able to police it also.
Yeah,
So it behooves us to congregate. In other words, if Rob has to make patrols at 6 o'clock in the morning to make sure you're picking up your tent or moving, that we don't have them scattered all the way all over town to do this. And the other issue we're gonna run into, and it hasn't come down yet, I mean, in our ordinance, if you allow them on your private property, you have to provide them sanitary facilities and garbage collection. On public property, they have not made any statements about that yet. Because as this happens, we all know that there's gonna be sanitary issues, and there is gonna be, I mean, what it says is you have to pick up your tent daily. And if you are living in an RV or a vehicle, which can be a car, you have to contain everything within your vehicle daily by 6 AM, or more or less. So where there's non-vehicle contained people, we are gonna have probably refuse issues, or somebody's gonna have to police them to
Right.
pick up all of their stuff. And we're gonna have sanitary issues unless the city is doing something like delivering, breaking it down to a small area, and we're putting Santa cans out every night and picking them up every morning, or leaving a restroom facility or something. That hasn't been addressed in state law yet, but I don't see how, if you're confining people to an area, you're gonna have a sanitary issue. I'm just,
So,
that's a general statement.
when we got together as a council and came up with our strategic goals for the year, I know that housing and addressing the unhoused situation is something that the council is definitely wanting to work on. But I will say this, it feels like our local authority has been taken away.
It hasn't been taken away. You've been given an unfunded edict that says you have to provide a an area, and they haven't defined how much area. It just has to be reasonable in somebody's eyes. Now, I can throw some things out there. I'm not saying these are right. As this map currently shows, it's approximately 40 acres of property.
Okay.
Building code defines livable space per person as 200 square feet. Okay? If we looked at a minimum of 200, and I can tell you in 2019, we had approximately a population of 400 homeless. Coos County has some data there that there was 1,329 homeless listed. I made an educated guess and said 1,000 of those are in Coos Bay and North Bend. And if we take the population percentage, that's roughly 630 for Coos Bay and 370 for North Bend. Coos Bay actually did a study and they had 613, and that's the only reason I walked you through all that is I'm in the ballpark. The homeless population has been increasing. We don't have any 2020 numbers or 2021 numbers, but between the prior study in 2017 and 2019, there was a 52% increase. I'm not saying that has continued since 2019. I don't have any data yet, which we're trying to chase. If, for example, we had 400 and we went to the 200 square feet per person building code, that we could scale all this down to about 5 acres. And even that 5 acres is a lot more than, and I'm dealing mostly with street, which I'm saying 40% of that street right away is occupiable because it's not supposed to be on the sidewalk. They're not going to be camped in a travel lane. So basically they can be camped in a parking lane or roughly the 7 to 12 feet behind the curb, in theory, on right-of-ways. They also can camp on public property, which includes Port of Coos Bay property, including the railroad, although very little bit of the railroad is, most of it's east of
But
101.
if you focused on that 5 acres, then we were actually creating a site, so we would be.
We'd be
managing
creating
it
a
from the
site,
sense
again,
of sanitation and everything, right?
the nice thing about that is we are able to contain that a little more on the garbage disposal, sanitation. Whether that meets some judge's definition of reasonable space, the only reference I have for that is building code, state building code. You have to have 200 square foot minimum
Yeah.
per person.
And is that within the city limits of North Bend? When you say 5 acres, like if you,
That's within the city of North Bend.
Within-
And remember, it doesn't matter, this is a tough decision for you. It doesn't matter which, even if we say we're gonna cut it down to 5 acres, it does not matter which 5 acres you pick. It's not gonna be in my backyard. I'm sorry, but that's,
So if I can jump in again, I believe that in the ordinance as written, the way that it is set up is it allows for council to decide to like set up essentially a camp, which is what you guys are talking around without wanting to say camp, because we have this sort of visual of homeless camps being the, you don't want it. But I think that that's maybe the reason that some cities are moving in that direction, is because then you have one area that you are making sure there's some extra sanitation facilities, and that the cops are going to go keep an eye on. And as Ralph was saying, not as spread out. But there's an option for that in the ordinance. It says may, you don't have to, but it is one way to do the kind of final mapping.
the other, and I agree with Jane, the only other issue that you have to consider, because you have some liability here, is reasonableness. So if you put it all in one area and it requires somebody to walk 4 miles to get there, are you gonna have a challenge on that
I
aspect?
think it's gonna be a combination of both of these. Is probably our best answer. Because 5 acres, you're not gonna find 5 acres in the city of North Bend.
Well, yeah, single site.
That's just not gonna happen.
That 5 acres was, really that boils down, to be honest, to about 2 acres of
Right.
pure ground.
Right.
It's getting better by
The 5 acres was based primarily on establishing right-of-ways, because you're gonna, as far as your motor homes and that type of thing goes, they're gonna be parked along a street somewhere.
Well, you know, just, not that I'm saying not in my backyard, but this, one of the yellow lines is right in front of our office. You know?
And that's in my backyard.
Yeah, that's in your backyard, that's right. But,
I
you
think
know,
one of my bosses is going to be writing a
also-
comment. I have a follow-up on that too, to keep in mind is the COVID situation. I'm not sure if the building code 200 square feet addresses that, but if we were going to actually do some math and be like, you know what, we really want to keep this in some very specific and contained areas, we probably should do some research on how much space we want to provide, and also to be successful, because there are people who are homeless because for one reason or another they can't be in the really, really crowded conditions that some shelters provide. We want people to be at these and use the sanitary facilities and comply with the regulations. We want to set it up in a way that it's doable. Like that's a good place to go to sleep, you know?
Well,
Like Ralph was saying, not too far away from everything, not impossible.
just one other quick comment is that, in all honesty, in front of our office between 8 o'clock at night and 6 o'clock in the morning is gonna have very little to zero effect on our business or any of the businesses around that area. And it's also a lightly populated, you know, Cedar Street itself is lightly populated. There's no homes on that street. You know,
I'm on Cedar.
well, you're 2 blocks away.
I
You
think,
know what I'm saying?
Ralph, I think we ought to go in cahoots and get in the alarm clock business. If we gotta wake them all up at 6 o'clock in the morning.
And that's the side issue, you know, once we adopt this. Again,
It's gonna have to be a combination.
staff was tasked with putting together an ordinance modeled on or at least one ordinance that's already been challenged multiple times. And that shows a lot more land area. I haven't looked at McMinnville's land area, but Coos Bay's basically allows almost 1% of their land area. Theirs is essentially the same as ours, only when they mapped theirs, they showed City Hall, their fire department, their library as sites people could camp. That's the only, and one piece out in Empire and one piece out in the east side that were public properties. They did not show the whole Port Coos Bay east side airport property. Most of that zone residential, but there's a little bit of commercial there. They restricted their whole piece of property where their sludge lagoon is. Part of that is restricted from access, but part of it isn't. So, you know, some of this, even in our ordinance, it allows, which we didn't show in my reading of it, the whole airport business park, because that's in essence open to the public. We didn't show it on our map. And we're not going to necessarily publish this map, but we have to give them a place to go. So as Rob's personnel enforce our ordinance, they're going to have to say, well, you can go here, here, or you can go to Coos Bay. But, you know, we have to provide, under state law, we have to provide a reasonable amount of area to facilitate them. And there is some silver lining to this, not a lot. Because on any private property, they both have to have permission. They have to be provided garbage and sanitary facilities. So,
And they can't charge.
And they
Oh, yeah,
can't-
That's important, actually. We absolutely are
We can't charge.
not providing landlord-tenant setups.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's super important.
Yeah.
So on one hand, in the residential areas, there's a big homeless camp below me. There's one across the street on Inland Point property. There's homeless in my neighborhood because I live in a forested area, nice, lots of trees.
Ralph, I did see Counselor Nardoff's hand. Did you have a comment or question?
I'm kind of, it's unfortunate that on the legend, the legend's cut off, and what I'm assuming is that something's sort of a light tan color, those are the areas where camping.
Yeah, yellowish tan is,
Well, yeah, but it's like, it would stand out better, and I'm kind of squinting when I'm looking at Broadway, and it looks like there's like a half a block on each cross street.
Broadway heading down towards Kenware and Coca-Cola is zoned commercial. Therefore, although obviously there's no parking on Broadway in that section,
Right, so it's a side street
um,
for half a block.
we show it included in there, but physically, other than camping in the right of way, behind
I
the
think
curb,
she's talking about
there's no
Broadway. I
parking.
think you're talking about Newmark.
Well, I was talking
Yeah,
about Newmark, and I
yeah,
realized
yeah,
that,
yeah.
but Broadway itself is no parking also. So Broadway and Newmark are no parking alongside the road, even though we show them in there. The only place physically they could camp would be in the right of way behind the sidewalk.
So,
I would just suggest that if you're gonna put this out for public, I would make sure that the legend shows, and I would choose a
This-
different color other than.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is totally a draft
Totally
map.
draft.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
There's a lot
I
of
get
these
it.
locations, just as you mentioned, Newmark, where they couldn't park a RV in there anyway, but we show it on the map. This was prepared in less than a week with multiple renditions
Sure,
to try to demonstrate, so you would have a visual to
yeah,
be able to consider and refine this down. This map is not the gospel by any means. It's, I would never assume it would be adopted in the form it's in right now.
okay.
Right.
It's a
Is
work
the-
in
I
progress.
agree.
Ralph, is the idea that, so the yellow, I heard you saying something about the lighter tan, but the yellow would be for us to kind of have an eyeball on the fact that this is what it would look like if we tried to meet the standard that's being asked of us, or the mandate that's being asked of us.
That is correct, and
And-
that is not necessarily the only areas. It was actually about a third draft
Yeah. And then the idea would
that would
be,
meet the
if-
standard in our opinion.
and if we came, as we go through this and we have continued work sessions and discussions, if there was an area where like that doesn't make sense for the community and we took it out, the idea would be then, well, where else would you add that back in?
Correct.
Correct, to a certain extent. Now, that is shown in yellow, and we already know some of it is not viable. Is approximately 40 acres.
40.
So, and I should say it down on the legend there somewhere. Conceivably, and again, reasonable on us, depending on how we address it, it could be confined, and that 5 acres was based on a 400 estimated homeless population. If we have today 600, that would increase to, let's say, 7.5 acres. But conceivably, this can be dialed down. There's going to be in my opinion, we're gonna have to scatter that in approximately, I'm just gonna say, not all the way through the city, but maybe 3 areas that we're and we're gonna have to concentrate them. Because again, in order if we have to police it, we can't have somebody
Going down every street.
going down every street. I mean, we're gonna have to police it anyway. And the silver lining, like I said, the silver lining is, like I just said, the camps I know of 2 of them, of at least 20 people within a quarter mile of my house. And really, they don't cause that many problems. I have to chase them out of my yard once in a while, but, so far. But those places are gonna be illegal for them to camp.
They're going to be.
they're gonna be illegal for them to camp without somebody, they're all private property.
Yeah.
I mean, there is some right of way down in there. Don't, but
I did see Counselor Nordhoff's hand again, but was there any other counselors that wanted to speak before we go back to her, had comment?
Just Counselor North, in our work session, there is a map in there also that actually shows the legend. a little
and I
bit.
thought we were gonna put it up, I wasn't as concerned about it, because I thought we were gonna put it up on the.
Yeah, we have the,
screen.
in our
It's not any
packet,
better, but it's
we have the full
all there.
version.
I noted the time that camping would be permitted. It's from 10 PM to 6 AM.
Correct.
And I think Coos Bay's is from 8 PM to 6 AM.
I think it's 9 to 6,
And
but
my personal feeling on that, if you have, people with little children, I think 8 PM is more humane than 10 PM. 8 PM just lets the kids get settled and, put them down for the night or whatever. If they're little, I mean, that is some people's situation. I just think 8 PM is more humane than 10 PM.
That's an easy edit for us to make if council likes that. You guys can, that'd be kind of a consensus question, and then we could just take it back and edit it.
I'm curious, I don't know if the city administrator, if there was any additional information that you wanted to add to Mr. Denham's, but also I'm curious what our public safety thinks tonight. We have the fire chief and the police chief here this evening.
Yeah.
I see some notes in here about towing and, do you have any comments, suggestion, advice for the council? Do you want to?
and I'll predate Rob here a little bit. If we tow one, it's probably gonna cost us $10,000. It's 30 days of storage, a tow, and then disposal of the vehicle. It's gonna be $10,000 a pop.
Yeah, storage, I mean, I'll be straightforward and honest with you. In terms of enforcement, this is not gonna be a high priority. I mean, we are answering life safety, imminent threats to body and life right now. We get to other stuff if we can, when we can. So, I mean, as you craft this, you should craft it with the idea that we're not going to have proactive enforcement of this. If we even have enforcement based on complaint, we may not have the capacity to do some of that. So there is that. There's the piece about towing that Ralph mentioned. That is going to be huge. Coos Bay budgeted $25,000 for towing and storage. We have had one very cursory meeting with Coos Bay PD to talk about how they're going to handle, or have they thought about how they're going to handle property. It's not, we don't have the capacity to hold the kind of property we're talking about. So we're going to have to figure out a way for the city to handle those issues as well. Because the camps that we have cleaned up, any items that actually have some value, they are never claimed. So we're basically going to be storing and then disposing of those items, and there will be a lot.
You're kind
You know,
of killing my lawn clock business.
Well, and that was the last piece, and you alluded to it, is that there'll be some that'll follow the rules, but there's going to be a lot more that don't follow the rules. In terms of location, time, and those are the calls that we'll get that we may or may not be able to respond to, so.
So right now, if we, as of July 1st, it's everywhere. It's difficult to respond to that. So if we do come up with an ordinance and we pass that, is it at least better
Well, it
from your
certainly
standpoint?
it certainly gives you the authority to be able to enforce. if you have the capacity to enforce. So yes.
Okay, I know the fire chief is here.
Next year. That's it.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And I wasn't sure if anybody had any further questions for the police chief, but I was just thinking fire, there's probably multiple fires that you have responded to due to, not allowed campfires and,
Yes, just, we're not allowing that. What does happen though is people are allowed to have warming fires.
okay,
And what those are is in your backyard, you have a hot dog fire. And we have a lot of those around town, and those can go even into the dark hours. And there will be these warming fires in each person's camp potentially. So we are going to be going out, and if they're not burning in a safe area, we're gonna suggest they burn somewhere else, but warming fires are allowed. As far as the medical side, we're going to respond to medical emergencies, and we currently do respond to quite a number of them in the homeless community. We've had, Ralph's trying to look at silver lining, so let's try to look at a little bit of silver lining here. We've had probably 4 or 5 wildland fires in the last couple of weeks caused by homeless camps. And some of these are in some pretty ugly places to get into. If they're not able to go onto the private property in some of the places, then hopefully they won't cause large-scale fires for us to deal with. But probably our major thing is we are going to have an uptick, is my guess, in the warming fires and us going out. Anyone who drives by any commercial and sees a fire going there, they're going to jump on their cell phone, they're going to call 911, and we're going to go out and evaluate it.
Well, Gussie's is a prime example, right?
Yep, yes. We got to go visit there on Saturday.
So when you say warming fires, do they need to be contained in some type of vessel?
In a perfect world, yes.
Okay.
But we don't live in a perfect world.
No,
Yeah.
So,
I think the ordinance actually gives you a little bit tighter control on that, Chief Brown. I think that there's some language about restricting open flame.
Yeah, prohibits open flame on public property.
okay.
right,
So
so,
that's helpful, thank you.
so these, what we call them, unfunded mandates from the state of Oregon doesn't come with an extra $750,000 to the police department and an extra $500,000 to the fire department to help govern this?
not that I can find.
Okay. And then to Ralph, is there 5 acres somewhere here on this map that you could show me that the city could own and?
Come on back.
Because that'd be great if we could.
He got while the getting was good.
Because here's the deal, right? Like even if we come up with a potential solution where we could have a facility that could help people, we still have to do something now. Because that could take a while to get funding and to put together some sort of facility that could house people that didn't have a home. But where would that be on this map?
Outside of residential districts, the city, and outside of Pony Creek Marsh, which has the good news is that tide comes in and tide comes out, takes care of your sanitary issues, but to a certain extent, but beyond that, I don't know that we could say, you're gonna camp out here in the tidal area. That's probably not a reasonable accommodation.
Give them cots with legs on them.
Rafts, floating
I got a floating
stands.
blind I'm not using, yeah.
So,
The city has 5 acres.
Okay.
The problem is it's in, primarily in residential districts. Commercial property is obviously more of a premium. Industrial property also is more of a premium. We do not have 5 acres per se in a commercial district, or even, and again, that's part of the issue, or even the ability necessarily to purchase unless we negotiated with Jordan Cove and purchased the stuff out there east of that they own east of the railroad bridge, or east of the McCullough Bridge, or west of the McCullough Bridge, excuse me. you know, a lot of this area has to be reasonable, and then again, the scattering throughout the city type, or, you know, the reasonable point to get to, we can't make them, in theory, potentially can't make them walk 5 miles to get to the only approved campsite.
Rel,
Yes,
I don't want to break your chain of thought, but I just thought of something. The 40 acres that is roughly designated on the map now, does that calculation include the parts of the right of ways that in fact are not going to be reasonable for people to be camping in? You know what I
it
mean?
does. It does, and my 5-acre number was based on 40% of the right-of-way being available, not 100%.
Okay.
Beyond that, I mean, again, the 5-acre is also just taking one standard out of the building code, based on 400, approximate 400 population. I think the population is probably higher today. I can't tell you where, but I think it's probably a little higher.
Yeah.
And again, it's a reasonableness standard. What we provided to you for your initial review, and then I'll let you interrupt me, Tim, I'm sorry, but just to kind of reiterate this, was Coos Bay had 1% of their land area. We tried to model this initially as 1% because nobody has, unless Jane knows of any, nobody has established a reasonableness standard that says you have to provide 35 square feet, like you had to for COVID per person. Nobody said 400, nobody said you have to provide X amount of square feet or this type of amenity. The only standard I picked that out of was the building codes. And go ahead, Jane.
The other standard that exists, to the extent that it's even a standard, like it is the cases talk about beds. If you have this many beds, then that many people aren't going to be on the street. So I think that to some extent it's based on a kind of a calculation of how many homeless people do you have and how in your individual area. But yeah, it's really wishy-washy. And there's two ways to look at that, right? One is, oh my God, how do we deal with this? It's not defined. The other is, okay, well, at least we get some discretion. Let's decide what we think is reasonable, and hopefully it is, and then we can defend it.
And Tim had a question, and I apologize because I cut him off.
Just a quick and easy one. Is federal land public land?
I don't think they've specifically defined that. Now, whether the state can regulate federal land, impose standards on federal land, to my knowledge,
So any
to a
of the
certain
court
extent, but
cases
not
would not
to-
apply to federal land.
I would think Boise v. Martin in federal court would probably stand on that some federal land would have to be made available also, but not necessarily all federal lands.
Well, isn't this all coming down from the federal government to the state?
That's the path we're seeing.
So
But not in the same route. The Oregon state legislation is based on primarily Ninth Circuit opinions. So it's definitely like it's West Coast, it's Ninth Circuit language. And Tim, Counselor, I'm going to stop going for your name and go for my point, which is Counselor Slater, that it's kind of going to depend on probably how that space is being used. Also, because Chelsea and I actually we were talking about, I think BLM leases a big chunk of land out by the airport. And that question was, well, okay, that is based on our definition, that's publicly owned, but it's being leased. So then you have a contract and you don't want to do anything that goes against a contract that was, made before the law went into place. And then it's a federal publicly owned entity. The short answer is we're not super sure how it's going to shake down, but it's a very interesting constitutional question.
Well, my only concern
Well,
is,
I think, Counselor Garbone, can you speak into your mic so everybody could hear a little bit?
I mean, I've listened that, I mean, this is all coming down from the hierarchy and coming down here. Feds to the state, to the counties, to us. And if our land's subject to use and whatever else, there should be too.
Well, the only reason I brought that up is you think through, first of all, the business park, which has been fully roaded, set up and whatever, has got one sort of temporary rental over 20 years plus. So you've got quite a bit of area there. I think the real, as I was envisioning a Hallmark thing, if we got the road out to the old boat ramp, a lot of area along that's pretty readily accessible throughout the whole city.
Shit, I might even live out there.
So,
Anyhow, it's just an idea.
just to clarify though, on that piece of the conversation though, when it is, and I think Jane was trying to get there, when it is being leased, it's in a lease agreement. I mean, is this,
She was pointing out a double public entity, for example, and you have a letter from Marino. So there's private rights on public property on that specific thing, which I think would be different than, say, BLM, who's leasing from the airport district, which you got a double, they're both public entities.
okay,
But the lease rights itself, we have an attorney in here, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a legal, but another example of that is DHS
we have,
structure, which is the state leasing from
Airport.
the airport. But, again, the bottom line is, we can select, which is a real tough decision for you. A terribly tough decision for you, is we can refine some standards. And the only reason I brought the building code one up is because that's, as Jane talked about, what's defensible. That, and refine this even more, but what I don't want to, I think in fairness to anybody, we can't say we're gonna put it all on the airport. Oh, we're gonna put it all on Pony Village, or downtown properties in front of Pony Village. We're gonna put it all on, if you're, first place, I think we're gonna have to find, say, like 3 different locations well interspersed throughout the city. And nobody is gonna want it in their backyard.
Right.
And, now, Bill may be okay with it, but I live 100 yards from his business, so
yeah.
I'm not, so, and I'm not, but I'm not just saying Ralph's not, I'm just pointing out that very few, if anybody, is gonna want their area picked.
So our job as council is to, listen to our constituents, get the public comment. I know as we go down tonight, we do have a section for public comment. I'm not sure if there's anybody signed up for it tonight. Kaylee, is there, as we receive this information, and this kind of goes to you and the city administrator, should we be making notes and sending them back to David Milliron? Because clearly we got to continue this discussion. We all look at this map and see things like, oh, maybe not in this neighborhood, or not this close to that business, or this might be in lease. We got to work through all that. And I'll get to you in a second, Councilor Nordoff, but what is the best way to collect this information? And, because I think it's going to be, as we move some things off here, we're going to have to readjust. So I don't know if we keep having these long conversations during work session, which are very fruitful, but what is the best way to move this forward?
I would like to suggest, just bearing in mind that every note you take and whatnot is technically something that people can ask to see. In order to not create a whole bunch of new hard to track public records, try to keep it here, because we want to make sure that discussions aren't happening outside, and that it kind of includes emails and whatnot, and then route everything through one person. If you go home tonight and have thoughts, I don't know if it's going to be David or Ralph or Chelsea or me, but but I think that's a good idea, Mayor, to choose a single person to route everything through. And then we can come back at another work session with kind of a compilation of your input.
Okay.
And the last part, I think, Jane, I wanted you to reiterate too, is you're gonna make a decision and you're gonna pick some amount of area and the properties where, and you're gonna have to have some careful consideration and documentation on why you picked those areas, because
People are going to challenge it and we want to be able to defend it. So we don't really want to get a whole bunch of notes from you guys after this meeting that says, hey, can you make the following changes, without any discussion on it, because then we lose the why. And we really need the why for when people start to challenge these. And I think people are going to.
So are you, Ms. Stebbins, is this something that you are suggesting we start giving some feedback tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, I think it would be the more feedback you can, I know you guys do not love this because nobody wants to be in a meeting forever. But if you get the ordinance copy ahead of time so that you guys, can give us feedback in the meeting so the public can hear that feedback and understand why we're doing what we're doing. And, after this conversation, you have a much better understanding of how it's working. You want to spend more time on it, come back in 2 weeks and we do it again. I think it would be better to do it that way than to send things between meetings, unless it's something like, for example, a really easy edit that you can go around and get a consensus on really quickly, like going from 10 to 8 p.m., for example. That's not too difficult, but any change that we make to this, we kind of want to know that the whole council's going to vote for it, or enough of the council's going to vote for it that it's not going to just have to go back to the drawing board again.
Okay. Councilor Nordoff, I know you had another comment. There was
an email from city administrator about holding a special work session on this.
This is
And
it.
I'm wondering if that's still a possibility.
Well, this is the beginning of it, this work session.
Okay, so are we having a special one, or would it just be 2 weeks since when we have our next meeting?
So I'm gonna bat over here to the city administrator and to the attorney for this one. Are we at the point, and this was a work session for this. This is one of the work sessions, but it's not the only. We as a council can decide where we're at. Are we at a point in this meeting where we want to give some feedback to the attorney and our staff here? Do we want to go ahead and, is that kind of how you were seeing it lay out to our city administrator? Is that what you were thinking? And then we would go back to another work session and review that again. Hopefully also get some more public comment and feedback. So Mr. Milliron and Ralph Dunham, what are you thinking?
it's not an easy decision. I don't think you're gonna do it in one meeting.
Right. Councilor Richardson?
I just have reading through this, and on page 4, the 8.34, 020, the temporary camping program about private property, and in section E, under A, 1, 2, and 3, my question is that, let's just say a church or an organization decides to allow multiple campers on their property, which it says that it will be allowed.
Up to 3.
Up to 3 people?
No, 3
Camps.
3 camps, and they have to be related, when I say 3, I think it's defined in.
That's per night, correct?
Vehicles, 4 tents.
Right, per night, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And they can be a family group, but they have to be somehow be related.
Right,
Yes.
okay, well, my question is, if this is being offered by these private entities, is that something that we may be able to factor into the properties that are being available by the city? Because
Yes, in the sense that when you go back to that calculus of how much space is there for these people versus how much are you providing, and that will factor into reasonableness. Yes. So if you can say, you know what, we regularly work with, the following 3 churches who we know for a fact are providing space for the following number of people. So that's, 40 beds that we don't have to provide sidewalk space for that.
Right, that was my question, because I think that may affect this. It may not be a large portion of it, but, if we can get every church or something like that to agree to having, which we're probably not gonna get everybody, but if we can get a multiple of 5 or 6 or 7 within the city of North Bend, because these churches do have huge parking lots, some of them, that might be able to kind of take some of the relief off of these areas that are probably not the best areas for people. It'll spread it around the neighborhoods to where there is less, people everywhere, and kind of concentrate it a bit and still be able to be reasonable enough for everybody to get to, one or another location.
So your suggestion is in the ordinance, just make sure we keep that in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the other thing, and this is probably back to the chiefs, is I know the council did authorize code enforcement this year, starting in July 1. Is that something that position could do and make sure that people were following the rules?
So that position encompasses code enforcement, parking, and backup dispatch. And we currently have 70 and 100 hours overtime training dispatch per month. So, in addition to that, I don't know who we're gonna get in terms of a person to fill that position. That's a very unique, 3 different very unique qualities. CSO positions generally are filled by students or recently graduated people looking to get into law enforcement. And some of these places are not places I would send a brand new green recruit.
I think, yeah, that might even be a question you might want to toss to city insurance as well. I don't know if that's,
Okay.
that would be an interesting safety question.
Well, so at this point, I know we've got some other things in the work session, but should we go around, and does each counselor have any specific feedback that we want to give right now to start a working document? Counselor Nordoff, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
I would suggest the 8 PM to 6 AM change to conform to, because we're trying to parallel with the city of Coos Bay so that we're not pushing homeless one way or the other.
I think theirs is 9 PM, but
So
let's
yes,
find out what
there's, I believe, if the draft that I saw in the Coos Bay Council packet is what they ended up passing last week, then it's 8 PM to 6 AM.
okay,
I
so
would suggest that
am I
change.
hearing you say check with Coos Bay and maybe make
Yeah.
sure we're in line with that?
And I would like to respect Mr. Marino's appeal to remove the section of property, I think it's on
Marion.
the street by Safeway, that street, and on north of Virginia. Marion, yeah.
And I know you have some people listening in, and you have the airport district's attorney. I don't know if you want to open up any public comments that are here. Nobody signed specific.
If I have discretion, I think now is the time that I would, let's go ahead and get all the counselors' feedback, and then if that is okay, we got to bring out the candy bowl if you're all starving, but I think this is the time to listen to it here.
Well, I'll go next if you don't mind.
Okay, Counselor Gall?
Yeah, I agree with what Susanna said there. And honestly, I've looked at this yellow highlight deal. The thing I probably really have the most heartburn in is, aren't we gonna put a safety crosswalk at Main? To have a block of Main and then a block of 14th and 16th, which goes right towards the school. I'd like to see Main and 14th and 16th go away, but that's my preference.
Okay. Counselor Garbo, anything specific? Counselor Richardson?
Well, like I say, I just talked, I think that we need to look at these, these other properties that are going to be available and figure out a way to contact these property owners, churches, other organizations, people that have large parking lots that are, and let them know that, that this will all factor into our final decision on where we want to, have places for these people to stay.
So what if, because something else to keep in mind with regard to the church, talking to the churches, is that there's an additional law, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but I had to look at it last time we had a homeless discussion a couple years ago. Churches providing for the homeless have additional protections so that there's only so much restricting of what they do that we even have the authority to do, or the state has the authority to do, because there are freedom of religion protections. And I think that if we maybe next time had, or however, I don't know how long it takes to make this happen, but if we were able to have conversations with some of the churches, and then we could come in with some numbers where we already knew this many people is having beds. I think another Orca might be a really, really good organization to get in contact with to work on that and try to facilitate kind of keeping track of what's needed so that we, again, and however you come at this, whether it's I don't want to do this or I want to help, having all the information will help. But if you come back and we've already got, I spoke to 4 churches and they told us we've got 50 people that we regularly house, then we can do some calculating and move that 1% number down a little.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I really like the idea of working with the churches in North Bend, because I feel like that might be a better way to regulate it and have the code enforcement and provide the sanitary situation. We've heard from people since I've been on council, residents come in that say, hey, somebody's camping out in front of my house and they're urinating on the lawn. Like we've heard that. And I feel like that's going to be a real problem. So if there was a way where we can go to the churches, it sounds like then we could maybe reduce some of the area if we get to a certain number of where they would be in the commercial and the business zones. So I'd like to explore that. It sounds like we need to take a look again at the Marino property and the airport property. And then, I'm looking at, there's a piece on here at the end of Hamilton that crosses on both sides of Virginia. And that is a really busy business. If you drive by the bowling alley at any time, even in the evening, it's slammed. And so I think that needs to be looked at, to have that. You would not want people parking there at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at all. They're very busy. And then you've got the restaurants on the other side too. So that would be something to look at, like those real busy business areas that have businesses past 8 p.m. And that's just like the first glance of that. So I apologize if I come back with more information, but I'm going to need to get out a magnifying glass to really dig into some of these areas. Yeah. Counselor Slater, was there some areas here that you have concern about?
Well, I guess in a couple of things, I appreciate the work that's been done between the cities to come up with something which is sort of the same or similar in their particular way, such that you're not pushing anybody any particular direction in here on that. I think Bill's idea of looking at the church-based opportunities and what might be out there and what we could use or not use makes pretty good sense. I think so far as this thing, which says draft on it, I think it's premature to be blessing it. And we've got the big one in hand. We've heard a bit about why it got set up that way. I think our next step on this is go home and do our homework, as how do these things fit together. We get input, whether we solicit it or not, from our friends and neighbors that say, okay, what are you thinking about there? So to me, comments, I think some comments were made which are probably appropriate, but I don't believe that we should be finalizing, shall we say, anything on this map at this time. That's sort of the next session.
Okay. Okay, and so I think we've heard from all the counselors, and I will go ahead and take some discretion. We have the airport's attorney here, if you would like to speak. Do you want to come forward so we can hear through the mic?
Yeah, no, just briefly. My name is Pat Terry. I'm the attorney for the Coos County Airport District. And my client just received a copy of the proposed draft map, I believe on Wednesday. And obviously there's a lot of airport property that's in the yellow zone. My client was quite concerned. And the airport's a little bit different. I mean, it's public property, but there are significant FAA regulations, safety, otherwise, that need to be adhered to. And really, we were just kind of in the dark about this, but really what I've heard here is quite hopeful, and thank you, Ms. Stebbins, for inviting me. But, yeah, thanks. If we know if there's a certain point person that we can interact with, so we can address those concerns, because really, some of the land on there is gonna be an airport apron here in probably about, 18 months. And we don't want the city to say, yeah, that you can go camp there, there's gonna be a huge gate, and people are gonna say no. And also, it could affect, your decision about where you put stuff. So as long as we have somebody to contact with, to interact with, that'll be great.
Okay.
But, and again, I'm really glad to hear about this, or where you are in this process now. It hasn't, obviously, you're a long way from the final product.
Yeah,
So that's good.
okay. And Ms. Stebbins, are you still online?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so what is the, are you the point person for Mr. Terry?
Dear God, I hope not. I could be.
Jane?
I'm sorry. Mr. Milliron, we probably should chat about that so that staff can, just because I don't think that you probably want, let me start this over. I suspect there will be more people than Mr. Terry who are going to want to provide their input and even like have a conversation. And I think some of them are going to be people that we might need to work out some agreements with the airport, like just, are there things that we can do to persuade, the airport to provide a certain amount of space on one edge if there aren't any, safety concerns? Can we negotiate something kind of like we're talking about doing with the churches? I don't know if you want to send that straight to my office because that's going to get expensive.
It sounds like,
David.
Our city administrator says at this point, we'll keep it at the staff level. So David Milliron.
Well, and that's perfect,
Yeah.
because I'm not gonna be sending this information.
Yeah.
It's.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All right, was there any further comments about tonight's discussion? And again, let's make sure that we're really clear that this is just discussion. So please be advocates for the city, and if you see these maps floating around out there in the city, that these are not something that are final, and these are just drafts, and it's part of the discussion. So, all right, thank you, everybody. The item B discussion is invasive species removal for the south end of Simpson Park. This was an item that we had on the work session a few weeks ago, and it had to get bumped to tonight. I believe Councilor Nordoff, this is an item that you brought forward.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Larry has another meeting
Okay.
at 6:30.
Okay. Yep, thank you. Appreciate that. So on page 9, Councilor Nordoff, did you want to go ahead and start the discussion?
Well, here's the thing. I'll refer you to the last page of our work section, and I had asked for Brian Owen.
And he's on Zoom, if we need to ask him any
He is?
questions.
He's here?
He's on Zoom.
Oh, hooray, I did not know that. All right, that's good news. All right, so the reason I'm asking is, and maybe, should I sit here to be able to control the slides?
Yes, I can do the slides.
Okay, so, yes, if you go ahead and bring up that first one. All right, so back in February or March, I'm not sure when, but there was a brush hog operation. It's noted in David, I think this is the city administrator's report from February 9th, and it makes mention under the parks that the staff also spent 2 days removing 4 homeless camps in the Simpson Park wooded area. And I don't know if that's the area south of the playground area, or if that's north around Pittem Loop. But sometime last spring, there was a brush hog that came in and took the cover, maybe, down to the duff, of about 6 inches of about an acre and a third in Simpson Park. And it's been left in this condition ever since. So I understand, and there were 2 homeless camps at least, at a minimum, and there's some debris left from the homeless camps it's still there. These are fairly recent photographs. And so I'm concerned because the 3 biggies here are the blackberry that's going to come back from the roots, and a forest engineer told me that it comes back with a vengeance. And there you see the ivy that is completely shrouding a really tall fir tree, a couple of them. The Himalayan blackberry comes back with a vengeance. It's all over the place. The time to spray it, according to the noxious weed specialist with Coos Watershed, is in the fall. We're coming up on the fall. We don't want to have to do this again. And there is one photo here somewhere of the holly tree that is growing out of a stump by the old swing set that's a little bit south and west of the tennis court. And that holly tree needs to go because it is spawning holly trees all throughout this area, and they put down deep roots really, really fast, and it's a bitch to get them out. I've had to do this in the past, and you have to dig and dig, or use a garden fork and lever them out. So, and those are the trees that are right at the south end of the park, and with a nice trail going off to the west, looking over the bay. So I'd like to ask if there's going to be any attempt to spray that, or if that's not possible from in-house, could we get council consensus or thought or a vote or whatever to ask Coos Watershed to put in a proposal on spraying the blackberry and possibly taking out the ivy that's shrouding a couple of the trees? Because now we have an open area that we can work in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the plan is for taking care of the debris. Unfortunately, we did not get the grant for the Oregon Coast Bike Trail.
No.
That would have been nice. I just don't know, but it's kind of an eyesore at this point when you head in and see just really, really lumpy ground and this blackberry everywhere. So I just wanted to bring it to council's attention, and if Brian can add his comments about it or his thoughts about it, I'm very happy to hear them.
Great. And I know he is online right now.
Good.
Brian, are you able to hear us okay?
He's muted.
You're still muted.
We're going to bring you online here if you want to give us
Let's try that. Can you hear me now?
We can, yeah. Were you able to hear okay some of Councilor Noroff's questions?
I was. And I can address a couple of them. At the time that we removed the brush, it was for safety reasons and to clear that out, because we did find 8 homeless camps in there. Out of the 8 homeless camps, 3 of them had fire pits in there, which was at any time during the summer, if that would have took off, we would have had major problems. The other thing is that it is in our plans to possibly go in there later this summer, early fall, to spray. I have 2 full-time employees and I have 1 summer help. And this time of year is usually our busiest time of the year, trying to maintain all the lawns and the green spaces. So it hasn't been a super priority for us. But we do have plans to do something this fall.
Great. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
So, Brian, are you still there?
I am.
So, how many cubic yards of material do you think that you have that needs to be hauled off-site as far as the old limbs, brush, ivy, stuff like that at this point?
I couldn't give you cubic yards, but we're looking at, we just ran out of funds this last year to finish it up completely when we did remove the brush. And we're hoping to have the funds this year. And there's probably going to be, I would guess, at least 3 days of removing the down limbs and the stuff that needs to be moved out of there.
Okay, so my next question is that how many dump truck loads do you think?
Dump truck loads, I would guess there'll probably be at least 15, 20
dump-
maybe, max.
Okay, so why don't you get with me and maybe we can donate some drop boxes for the removal for the city, like we've done to Ferry Road Park over the years. I don't see any difference in that whatsoever.
No, that'd be great. I'll get hold of you, Bill, and we'll talk about that soon.
Okay. So
Thank you.
Problem.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. Should we go ahead and move on then to number 4 on the agenda, which is the review the Urban Renewal Agency agenda for August 9th, 2021. Well, Mr. City Administrator, do you want to go ahead and walk us through that? I see that tomorrow night we've got some things to discuss and then also in an executive session.
This is actually a discussion for a meeting tonight.
Oh, sorry, I apologize.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
It's rather unusual.
It isn't, yes.
So in there, the only thing for public discussion would be on page 4. Previously, I brought to the URA board the URA redevelopment assistant grant application. The goal here is to incentivize outside the traditional facade grant program, but to actually get some earth moving. And so we're looking at potential 20% match grants. This is where the applicant in the URA zone would actually fill out the application. If it meets staff approval, it would then move on to the URA board for consideration. And we would use our budgeted URA funds towards that project. So this is a request to approve the application, and then staff then, if granted approval, would start marketing this to targeted businesses that are looking to expand and make investments. It's always important that on these projects, obviously blight is your facade grant. This is more about jobs in increment in overall value and focused on the URA plan and extending that plan and moving it forward.
Okay. Councilor Gall.
I just got one question, David. Is there a cap on that?
That's up to you.
Yeah, okay,
I
so
don't
is
recall
that,
that I actually put a cap, but you have a budget, and so you can't exceed your budget.
okay.
Okay. So did the counselors catch that? So this is, after our work session tonight, we're going to adjourn our work session, and then we're going to go into our urban, we'll adjourn the work session, and then we'll go right into the urban renewal meeting tonight of this packet.
So that's been advertised?
Has that been advertised,
Yes,
David? Yes.
absolutely.
Yes. Yep.
Can I ask a quick question for those of us online? Is this meeting going to stay the same, or do we need to sign out and click back into a new link?
When the work session's over, we'll be going into a URA meeting.
It is a separate meeting link, Jane.
Thank you.
And just as long as we're talking technical pieces, when we go into the URA meeting, after this meeting. A piece of it is an executive session. And we'll just do that as is in the agenda. So there'll be some signing in and some signing out. Did you catch that, Jane, too?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Milliron. So we reviewed the North Bend Urban Renewal Agency agenda. We're still in the work session. And I believe that takes us to number 6, which is public comment. Nope, it doesn't. It takes us to 5, which is review city council agenda. So let's do that next. So number 5 on the agenda is our packet for tomorrow night. We've got the call to the order and the Pledge of Allegiance. We have some staff recognition, which will be great. Sergeant Doyle for 10 years and Ed Perry. And then we have a swearing in tomorrow evening. Is that correct, Chief Brown?
Yes, it is.
Jeremy Potter?
Yes.
Okay. And then we'll have the consent calendar. Mr. Milliron, did you want to take this on?
First thing is you have your finance director, Jessica Terra, online. She'll talk to you about the bills from 2021.
Bills are included in the packet, nothing out of the ordinary.
Any questions for the finance director?
No.
All right, the next would be Brian Owen, our park superintendent, and he's got a request for a lift gate for an F-250 for Parks Drive.
Okay.
Page 25.
Mr. Owen, are you able to, did you want to comment on this?
Well, I'm starting to figure this phone out now. So, yes, we have 2 trucks that have lift gates on it. We want to put the 3rd lift gate on the last truck. A lot of the equipment that we load, hand mowers, generators, pressure washers, we're finding that it's a lot easier on our bodies to be able to put it on the lift gate and not have to put it up ramps or have 2 people there to load equipment up anymore. So we'll be asking for your guys' blessing on getting a lift gate.
You don't have to sugarcoat it, Brian. We're just getting old.
Well, I am. I don't know about you guys, but I am.
Okay. Let's see.
All right, so any issues with either of those consent agenda items?
No.
No, sure.
No?
All right, that'll work with me then. The next one is we're going to bring up our Public Works Director. This is Public Hearing 1859. You already heard this, and I'll have our Public Works Director explain why it's back before you again.
Very simply, we did not specifically identify the time and place of the hearing when we got a letter of appeal to the owner or their representative. They have requested an actual hearing before the council for this specific, and that's
And so
same issue, just they want to be able to speak their piece, and we
Okay.
did not, in our error. I won't make excuses. I'm just going to say we didn't give them a specific time and date to appear, so.
We don't do this every month either.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, thank you.
And they'll be online tomorrow evening or in person? Do we know?
I don't know if we,
We believe one will be in person. We've had contact from the owners, but they've been provided with the Zoom.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you.
On page 35, council, you have resolution 3308. I believe the chief is speaking on this, not the captain this evening.
Mr. Milan, did you skip number 6?
I did,
Okay.
yeah. I can.
Oh.
That's really for you all to decide tomorrow. It's historically you all cancel your second meeting, so it'll be up to you all to tell staff whether or not you're canceling that meeting. And so, sorry.
Okay. Okay. Well, we can discuss it now, or we can discuss it tomorrow.
I say we talk about it tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So think about that, if you want to have a meeting on the 24th or not, or yes, then we can discuss. Hello, Chief.
Hello. This is a housekeeping item. The equitable sharing agreement and certification we sign every year is an agreement between the federal government, the city, and our police agency. which essentially says that if there is a law enforcement forfeiture on a federal case in our jurisdiction that allows for us to, that there's a nexus with our agency or our city, that we are allowed to collect a percentage of that forfeiture. I've been here 8 years. We haven't had any federal law enforcement cases that resulted in an asset forfeiture that could benefit us, so, but we do have to sign and certify the agreement, so.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
So for the benefit of the council, if you'll look on page 41, it says governing body head, so you'll be authorizing the mayor to actually sign it or their designee on behalf of the city, and that's why the item's before you. The next item, Public Works Director, is a purchase of a Quebeco excavator. It's on page 42 of your packet.
The city has leased an excavator to do primarily its sanitary sewer work. We've leased it for 4 to 5 months a summer, and as several of you are aware of how equipment operates, to dig trenches, it is the most efficient piece of equipment. We've leased it at an amount of approximately $20,000 a year for the last 3 years to do our work. And our crews, including the lease, we're only digging to a maximum of 12 feet. In fact, we prefer not to go below 10. Beyond that, we contract out. But even on, for example, West Airport Lane, which was about 8 feet deep with a lot of groundwater, we contracted that out. But that was almost $400 a lineal foot for replacing that sewer. Our crews have been replacing sanitary sewer systems, including the lease of the excavator, including the paving, which we contract out later, the repaving, for about $250 on the average. So it's a savings. Broadway, which was much more difficult, I'm not even trying to compare, was almost $700 a lineal foot on sewer, but that includes the laterals. I'm talking about mainline sewers. The advantage, we've leased it at about $20,000 a year. We can buy the same piece of equipment for $110,000. The advantage is we don't have it for 4 months, only 4 or 5 months out of the year. We have it during the winter on emergencies. We have an equipment trailer that will handle it already. We purchased that, if you remember, a year and a half ago, because we were paying $1,000 a month rent on an equipment trailer when we're leasing the excavator. It's a much more efficient piece of equipment for doing trench for a couple reasons. It's just a quicker digging machine, but also it can actually lift and pivot, moving our shoring instead of our rubber-tired backhoe. Set the outriggers, pick it up, set it aside, move, pick it up, move it. So it's more efficient in that aspect, and that's primarily the reason we've been leasing it. We were asked for 3 quotes. We actually asked 4 people for quotes. We received 3. The excavator we're currently leasing, which, by the way, our staff likes the best, was the cheapest at $110,000. We've been leasing that specific piece of equipment. It's brand new 2021 for 2 months. I don't know if we've made a payment yet on the lease, but any lease payments we made on it go against this purchase price also. So it was the lowest bid, plus any lease payments we have will drop that price even. Therefore, staff is asking for $110,000 to buy an excavator.
And that's a 20,000-pound machine?
It's a 20, yeah, I think it's 19 something.
Yeah.
And it includes the bucket, the thumb, the quick
yeah.
connect, the.
Thumb's $10,000.
How long will it last? Like probably 15
Oh,
years?
Our equipment, historically, we don't run them as many hours as a private industry does. But typically they'll last 5,000 hours, and we run this equipment probably in the neighborhood of 400 hours a year.
I've got equipment down there with 30,000 hours, so, I mean, that's gonna be, this excavator is a good purchase for you.
It'll last 20 years easy.
Yeah, historically, our equipment, if you look at our dump truck fleet, for example, now granted we bought all except for one used. The newest one's a 2006 We go back to 1991, so.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a good machine.
That's a good price, yeah.
Sounds like a good deal.
They have government discounts, so.
It must because the steel prices itself is just half a second. I mean, that's great.
So if there's any other questions on that, I'll go to the next one.
Okay.
That's the pump no? Yeah. Yeah, number 9, right? Purchase. How do you say that?
Is that a seat cushion? Oh.
This is an impeller design, which I was just gonna pass around. Actually, you can all look at it. The difference between this pump and others, that's a semi-screw impeller design. As you're aware, we bought some Wheelo pumps at Pump Station 5 that are 50 horsepower pumps. They're our primary pumps, pump about 80% of the city's waste, day in, day out. They're also on a variable speed drive, which means they run from 1,800 RPM maximum down to about 900, and they flow. The theory of that is we have a 1,750 gallon a minute pump, which will flow down to about 800 gallons a minute. So instead of having to have more pumps, we're adjusting the speed on these to cover different ranges. As you're aware, we've paid, I think, in the neighborhood of $75,000 for the Wheelo pumps. They lasted us 8 years. They've been rebuilt. That's being after having been rebuilt twice. They're not the right pumps for it. They were an economical pump. We put them in. They haven't held up. Staff came to you emergency because if you look on the purchase order, it says 25 weeks order time. We're afraid that our Wheelos, if they go down one more time, we won't even be able to rebuild it. We'll be running on one pump. We're required to have 2 of the exact same size for reliability. We'll be running on one pump. We hired Dyer Partnership to review the pump station and come up with recommendations. Out of the recommendations, was part of that's included in your packet. They evaluated, we're into the next level of quality pumps, and they ranked those pumps. Hydrostall came in number 1, although Flight is a very close second. And of course, the most expensive of the 3 was the highest rated. I'm not picking on it, I'm just saying, and I'm gonna explain to you a little bit why. Flight's a very good pump. Sulzer's a good pump. I wouldn't always say a very good, but Flight has a very good reputation. Flight has an impeller that's a non-clog, and part of our big problem with the station is we clean it daily, clean rag balls out of it. Flight has one of the best well-known non-clog impellers out there.
Looks like it does some grinding almost.
It actually has a cutter on it. It's typically not as efficient because of that. However, the pump they actually proposed on, which was 113,000 something, it had a very efficient at the top end of the range. It was 80% efficient, but keep in mind that's with a 60 horsepower motor on it. So 60 horse times 80%, top end of the range. Its efficiency curve they're not flat, they're a curve. As you drop off to half speed, its efficiency was down around 68%. I think it was almost 80 or just a fuzz over 80 and we're mostly running at the lower speed, to be honest. Our pumps start up, they ramp to full speed to clear any debris, and then they kind of just chug along with the flow that's coming in, try to match the flow, which is typically closer to half speed on the pumps.
So, is it my understanding that you're recommending the Flight pump from Xylem?
No, we're actually recommending the Hydrostall.
Okay.
And here's the next step, and the reason. The Hydrostall pump on the top end of the range was 79% efficient. On the low end and it's only a 45 horsepower motor. So power usage long term, and we're now up to 132,500. Power usage on the high end are 79% efficient on a 45 horsepower motor. Their low end of their efficiency is like 74, 75% at half speed, which, I'm not going to say you're running half the horsepower. It's not straight linear, but So there's a power efficiency there, and it's a semi-screw impeller instead of a true centrifugal pump impeller. That impeller was actually designed, they pump live fish through. That was his initial design facility.
Fingerling fish.
Fingerling fish, but it handles, we have flights in pump station 3 and pump station 6. We have almost every pump we have in the wastewater plant itself, every heavy duty pump that handles our RAS, our waste activated sludge, and we're talking more fibrous and more solids here. Typically in a wastewater treatment plant is a hydrostall pump. So we know for a fact, and they're not a true impeller, so when I said the only guaranteed impeller, true impeller out there is Flight. Hydrostall doesn't have a true impeller, but our experience with them, because we're pumping a lot of fibrous waste in our wastewater treatment plant, is they've held up extremely well. And
Did I read somewhere where you don't have to change your freak drive either?
we don't have to, Flight recommended changing the drive.
Yeah.
We don't have to change the drive on this one to run it. And it's 45 horsepower at 79% efficiency versus a 60 horse at 80%. And that's quite a bit of difference in power cost. I could have calculated that out, but we are paying almost $20,000 more for the pump.
Right, but you've also budgeted 110,000 already for this budget cycle.
Right, we had originally got some quotes from Flight before the budget period, and they gave us a quote of 102,000. By the time we budgeted and got quotes, Flight's pumps are up to 113,000. This one is 132, which does exceed what I included in the budget for the pump. We do have 3 pieces of equipment in that budget line item, and the excavator being one of them, we put 120,000 in, and we're only going to spend 110.
Right, you've also
So,
got
I mean, we
you've
have the
also
money in
got
the
money
budget
in
to
the
do it.
fund.
I put it in there to let you know that we anticipated 110 for it. We're asking for 132. But even Flights is above 110 now.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Okay,
Perfect, thanks.
all right.
Okay.
Anything else you need to buy?
I can come up with some things.
All right, Madam Mayor, we'll bring up our library director.
Okay.
There's 2 items. The first will be page 61, and then in companion to that will be an agreement to the larger contract, which is on page 89 of your packet.
Okay, thank you.
Hello.
Hey, Haley.
So the library has received a large grant from the State Library of Oregon as part of the American Recovery Plan Act to embed a qualified mental health professional in several of our regional libraries. The amount of the grant is $158,091.01. We're very precise with our application. And so the agenda item is seeking authorization for me to sign the grant agreement with the state library.
Okay,
Okay.
that's all good news.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
And as our city administrator said, the second agenda item related to the library is a contract with Bloom Consulting LLC to provide project implementation support for this social work project. And again, seeking authorization to sign the contract.
Okay, great. Any questions for her? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor. We'll call our Public Works Director back. As you had heard earlier, our city planner is on vacation, so he's going to come forth on page 92 of your packet as proposed amendments to the text of Chapter 5.20 North Bend City Code, also known as our, I'll just call our food truck ordinance.
Okay.
Our food truck ordinance, as it was originally drafted, I don't know if you remember, some of you were very new. I think it was adopted in November, and it was not originally vetted. Had a long bunch of discussions, and then it was a hurry up and let's pass this thing, get it implemented, even though we knew there were some issues with it. What is brought before you now is cleaning up some of the language and some of the input we've had from both council and from the food truck operators to make the ordinance more palatable. Some of the original, what we thought was the original intent, one of the changes was we only allowed it in commercial districts. However, in this case, we allow it in residential districts that have a conditional use or are operating as, that way like a church in a residential district can have a food truck as part of their, that's one of the big ones. The rest of it is just primarily cleanup language.
Okay. Did anyone have any questions on this for Ralph?
I think food trucks are good for our area.
Yeah, it's sure fun to see them down on the waterfront for the special event.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you for cleaning that up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and that concludes the overall view of the council meeting, and it's now time for public comment.
Okay, let's see here. So, to our city recorder, did we have anybody online for public comments?
You do not, they have all signed off, they were part of the airport's contingent.
Okay.
You do have before you a packet of public comment submitted in writing.
Okay, and it looks like there is, okay. So each one of these is specific?
Correct.
Okay, let me see here. Okay. All right, I'm going to go right over the microphone here. I do like to always say thank you for those who are participating in public comment in person and online. We do like to point out that public comment period is an essential part of local government meetings, and each person has 3 minutes to speak or for me to read it into the record. Our governing body takes the input into consideration. However, in order to comply with the Oregon open meeting laws, this isn't a time for dialogue, but rather a time for us to listen to you. Our city administrator and recorder are taking notes of any action that is needed. And so, Kaylee, will you help me out with the time as I begin to read these? Okay. The first letter for comment that I have, it's addressed to the City of North Bend, to Honorable Mayor and City Council regarding the mapping of airport land under lease to Pony Creek Development LLC. And it's signed by Jeff Marino and Scott Lewis. I was recently informed that our 1.04 acre triangular tract of land on the east side of Marion Street was included in the mapping for the homeless population. As Ralph Dunham so politely informed me, the city is responding to the recent enacted law regarding allowing the homeless population access to all government-owned land with exceptions. Our parcel has been under lease from the airport district to the Troutman family since 1980, and now to assign to Pony Creek Development LLC. The triangle parcel is also in pending sale agreement with another private party to acquire the leasehold interest and develop the site for storage purposes. The property is a privately held estate, not a government-controlled property. Therefore, I respectfully request that this private, not government, leasehold estate, our interest in this property, be removed from the proposed mapping that is the council's packet, that is in the council's packet. Thank you so much for your consideration. Jeffrey L. Marino, M.A.I., and Scott R. Lewis. Okay, the second letter that I have is from Renee Hickman. I wish to speak to the council on the following agenda item, and it says, in lieu of speaking, I request to submit the following comments. I applaud your efforts to restrict the allowed camping in our city limits. My greatest concerns are sanitation, destruction of adjacent properties, and danger to children. I do not feel the access roads to our North Bend Middle School should allow camping, and consideration should be given to businesses impacted by the negative presence of the unhoused. And this is by Renee Christine Hickman. This letter is from Helen Minu, and it says here that this is in regards to the camping ordinance. And in lieu of speaking, I request to submit my following comments into the record. I own property south of Broadway and 16th Street, and your ordinance does not take into consideration of the businesses and parking available in that area. On the west side of Broadway on 16th Street is a business on one side and residential on the other. The east side of Broadway on 16th is marked no parking to the middle of the block. That is a very busy street with students walking to and from schools, and then traffic dropping them off for school and then picking them up after school. Allowing camping and parking would negatively affect all the businesses in this area. You have also identified Newmark and Broadway intersections as another camping area, and yet there is not parking on either side of the two streets in that area. The last area of concern is the airport property. With all the tourists and traveling public getting on and off airplanes, that would not be very welcoming. If that is your intention, please use the two parks by the bridge. And this is again signed by Helen Minu. Last letter that I have to read this evening is by Nancy Linnae. And again, this is, I wish to request that my comments be read into the record, and this is in regards to the camping ordinance. Under short notice and after reviewing your plan, there are several issues that should be considered. First location is Broadway and 16th on the north side. You're recommending camping and parking on a portion of road that is a pull-in parking lot and would be impeding traffic in front of Fast Mart, and spaces that would block and a hazard for children from walking to and from the junior high schools on the south side where there is no sidewalk and is residential. On the east side of 16th, there is a heavy traffic at the restaurant, and allowing campers and RV in front of Dishner's will block the view of traffic going in and out of Broadway, allowing for more accidents. And the 3 p.m. traffic, school traffic, and sports teams that run in the area would be displaced. Second location is Newmark and Broadway. You have indicated that on Newmark east along the shopping center and down the hill, no parking on either side of the Newmark, so camping only on the sidewalk, yet failing to allow pedestrian traffic on both sides of the street. The same is true with Broadway South. Third location is airport property. Allowing the homeless to be a focal point of the visitors to our area is not a welcoming sign. We would appreciate an open meeting as well as the ability to post pictures of streets affected. And that is signed by Nancy Linnae. That is the last letter that I have for public comment. So I will go ahead and I see we have somebody raising their hand in the back. Mr. Cooch, are you signed up for public comment?
I did not sign up.
Okay. I'm going to allow some discretion this evening. And if you have public comment, would you like to come forward?
I will be brief.
Okay. And Kaylee will be timing you.
I realize it's late. We all had multiple names for the year 2020. I think the year of the dumpster fire was my favorite. I call it the year of angst. 2020 is a year of angst. 2021 has been a little better. It's my mission to try to eliminate as much angst as possible this year. During the public safety fee discussions, I stood before the council and I asked them to please do everything they could to get the word out to the community about why we needed the public safety fee. Chief Kappelman gave us a slideshow. Very few people actually saw that. I'm just asking, I'm imploring you, please, 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 please get as much information out as you can about the camping ordinance. I can't stress it more strongly because this has the potential to seriously divide the community again, and I don't want to see that. So please, 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 get as much information as you can out. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, so I am seeing and hearing no further public comment. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting, and then we will reopen into our Urban Renewal Agency meeting. So, work session adjourned.